Sorry for the background noise of the roosters.
That's okay. It's not working.
Okay. Oops. Sorry. God. Okay. Here we go. Here we go.
Hello everyone. Morning. Waving back to you all. Good evening if you're in another part of the globe.
God. Okay. Let's just start. I
Okay.
guess. Let's just start. Trying to come a little closer together so we can get in each other's screens. Okay. Hello, everybody. I guess we'll just start.
Okay.
So I'm Adrienne. I am the Yoni nutritionist, and I help women connect to their yonis and heal their yonis through nutrition and wellness and mindfulness.
And my name is Kristin Murray Alexi, and I'm a sexologist, sex coach. I work in women's wisdom teachings and work with women with their pleasure, with their cycles, and feminine embodiment.
So we, just to kind of give you a briefing on what we do together, is we both have very different areas that we focus on, but we come together just to share our knowledge on yoni health and feminine health, women's health, sexual health, all of that, just to help everybody become more aware of their yonis and the wellness of their yonis, because a lot of people are disconnected from that. And so we're offering this once a week. We cover a different topic every week, and we're just so happy to share our passion with you.
And we are also offering them in person in Bali on Mondays from Zin Cafe.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in Bali, you can come catch us a little bit later on in the day on a Monday.
Specifically in Canggu.
In Canggu, yeah.
Bali.
So today's topic is going to be on menstruation, and we're going to dive into that a little, as much as we can, as I said, over the next half an hour. Last week we did our live and we were both bleeding, and we're like, maybe this will be our next topic. We're both quite cosmic in that live, not so structured and logical. So, did you need a moment?
Yeah, I need a moment. I'm sorry. I'm still having technical difficulties. Okay. Here we go. On my end. Here we go. Hello,
Nice.
Everybody.
Hello.
Sorry about
We're
the
back.
interruption. We're back. Wi-Fi.
But in Bali.
Yeah, so we're talking about menstruation today and how we can connect to and understand our monthly cycles. Because a lot of us aren't connected to that part of ourselves and don't really know what to do or how to eat or how to kind of manage it.
And we're going to specifically talk about menstruation today because we're just kind of like working with half an hour. There's obviously other phases of our cycle that we'll probably go into during different times of the month. Yesterday was a new moon, so that's normally when we would menstruate, so it's the perfect time to dive deep into menstruation. But yeah, there's other phases of the cycle that we'll go into in other talks. So, did you want me to start today?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. So, when we first start bleeding, it's called menarche. It's generally around age 13, but it can be earlier or later. And this is a really powerful time. We're transitioning from a little girl into a woman, and our uterus is growing, we're starting to become more aware. We can reach heightened states of awareness, and we've got this new responsibility of fertility, and it's this beautiful phase that often goes unnoticed, and not unnoticed, but it isn't honored in our society of this huge transition. And this can see to a lot of young women being kind of like insecure, in a state of confusion over this transition in their body. Our hips are widening and all of these things are changing, and we're not seeing we're not understanding what's happening with our bodies. You can see, I don't know if you've experienced it, but I know I did in my school. There's a lot of young women who were going through like experiences of eating disorders and disconnect from their body or self-hate of their body because they're not understanding these huge changes, but they're becoming so aware of their body. And so this is a huge topic in itself, and in menarche and this rite of passage where if it goes unnoticed, then we can kind of go into the shadow aspect of the feminine, whereas if we really honor and respect and acknowledge this transition from little girl into woman, it's a much easier transition, just as with all the blood rites in our life. But that's another topic in itself. So what happens during menstruation is we've had a build-up of hormones during our cycle, and after we ovulate, there are ducts inside the uterus, inside the uterine lining, and it becomes nutrient dense with what would feed an egg if it was fertilized. And then what happens when the egg isn't fertilized, there's a drop in both our progesterone and our estrogen, and this causes the thickened layer of the uterine lining to fall away. And so we've had this build of hormones, which is the premenstrual phase, which is why we can experience a lot of tension and heightened states of awareness as well, but generally like increased sensitivity. And then once those hormones drop, we can kind of like relax. Usually when we bleed, that premenstrual tension just leaves our body and we can go into this other blissful state. And this is when we would access our deep wisdom. And so menstrual huts, this is when women would gather in menstrual huts around the dark moon or on the dark moon, and when we would come together and share our wisdom and what was coming through, whereas men would have to kind of go on vision quests for 3 days without food, where they could access or use plant medicines to access heightened states of awareness. So this is a really beautiful time if you can take time out. Generally it's when you're feeling the most kind of lethargic is when you can access these heightened states of awareness, and gain insights and downloads into how we can evolve as a person, as a family, as a tribe, globally. So there's a really beautiful relationship between the hypothalamus and other parts of the endocrine system that happens when we are menstruating, and it's beautiful because it's a self-regulating mechanism where a certain amount of hormones are produced, and then once the organ is affected by this hormone production, then the hormones stop and then it carries on to the next part of the cycle. So it's this really beautiful self-regulating mechanism. And the thing is though, when we experience extreme levels of stress in our body or emotionally, then this can kind of like, because our body needs to kind of go into survival mode, the first thing that happens, one of the first things that can happen is our menstruation stops, because our body is like, okay, well we're not in a situation to be reproducing. And so there's like the conversation between the pituitary and the ovaries. There's a miscommunication, or there is a communication of, okay, we shouldn't be procreating now, so we're going to stop this and reserve our energies for survival. And that can happen when there's a stressful event. If we're putting a little stress on our body, like working out, we're kind of acting quite linearly and goal-oriented and more in our masculine. If we've like toned ourselves so much that we can't store any estrogen in our body, it can totally change our menstrual cycle. And it can be a beautiful gift because it's just demonstrating, it's like, maybe it'll stop for a little while, but then we're out of that stress zone, but there's been an interruption in the communication in the body. And so it's like, it can be a gift to reintroduce us back into our feminine way of living and explore our body, explore our connection to the moon. The lunar cycle is 28 to 29 days long, the same as an average menstrual cycle. So it's really beautiful to develop this relationship, and this is something I can go into really deeply, but I won't here. So the next thing I'd like to touch on, just before I finish up and hand you over to Adrienne, is that sex while bleeding is normal. A lot of women feel really aroused during their menstrual cycle. There's actually an anatomy type that three different anatomy types generally that tend to, and that this is like a whole other topic in itself, tend to feel more aroused just before bleeding or while bleeding. And if that is you, that's totally normal. It's beautiful to make love while bleeding, whereas some sisters do not want to make love while bleeding at all. I mean, the energy of the flow is down and outwards, so you know, that kind of makes sense as well. So it's just something, it's up to you. If that's something that you enjoy, you can talk about it with your lover. And when it comes to menstrual flow, so what's coming out of the yoni is, it's not just blood, there's also mucus and there's also tissue from the endometrium. So it's like, it's not just blood. So I feel like that's really powerful, knowing what's actually coming out of our body when we're bleeding. So it's more, I guess it's more appropriate to say flow rather than blood. And there are all different ways that you can work with this menstrual blood, and that's something that I talk about when I do more one-on-one work or in my courses and programs. So yeah, I think that's pretty much everything from me.
It's just,
I kind of spat it all out at you, sorry. I just didn't, I know I could go on about each topic for a year, so
yeah, and
I'm just giving the surface.
Yeah, we're so excited to share this information, and we're both so passionate, and we can just go on and on and on about this stuff, but like, we're just trying to give kind of a high level, just to share the information that we do know, just high levels, just to share it with you and educate you.
Just
so
the parts
thank
that we
you.
feel like that will really help, and just
little
get
nuggets.
You thinking. Yeah.
And this is so interesting for me because like I was never taught this stuff growing up. Like no one taught us this stuff.
Yeah.
In our generation. So it's like I never learned how to live around or like take care of myself based around my cycle, and it's just so fascinating. And I just have to tell you that like I'm learning so much from you just by listening to your talks and working with you. It's just so interesting.
I am too.
Yeah. Oh, loud. It's just so cool. Like when we can get this so in touch with our bodies and our cycles, it just helps us with our feminine empowerment, and just like it just helps. It just helps us with our sensuality, our power, our confidence. When we can learn to like really tune into our bodies in this way, it's just so amazing. And that being said, I'm going to talk to you about the nutrition part of when we're bleeding and what you should be eating when you have your period, and what you should be avoiding, because it's really, really important as well to take care of your nutrition when you have your period, because when we can nourish ourselves during that time when our body is going through this change, it just helps. It helps with grounding, it helps with the feminine embodiment, it helps with the self-love and self-care. So I'm just going to break it down into three main things, just to again keep it high level so we're not rambling on for like an hour, because I tend to do that. So when we experience our period, normally the things that we experience are cramps, mood swings, and bloating. We all experience that when we have our periods, and I know for me, like, it's hell. Some women get it worse than others, but for me the mood swings are terrible. So I just wanted to kind of highlight some of the things that we should be eating to kind of support that or help prevent these things from happening. So with cramps, calcium is really good for cramps. So things like dairy products, which I tend to avoid because it's one of the inflammatory foods. And when we're bleeding, it's not good to be in an inflammation state. But there are other things that you can find calcium in. For example, broccoli. Cheese can be also good in small, moderate amounts. And yeah, almonds is also a really good source of calcium. Bok choy, and as I mentioned, broccoli. So that's good. Magnesium is also really important for us because magnesium is a natural muscle relaxant. So it really helps with the cramping, especially when the uterus is contracting. So magnesium, you can buy a supplement form of both calcium and magnesium, but you can also find it in chocolate, which I have talked about before. It also helps with PMS, and a lot of us crave chocolate when we are experiencing PMS or when we're on our period, and that's why. It's because our body needs the magnesium. So that's also really important. Omega-3s, like the good fats, are really good as well for cramps. So foods like salmon and eggs and walnuts, stuff like that. Get that into you while you're menstruating because it really helps with the cramps. B vitamins are also really good, and again, you can find those in eggs, in flax seeds, in nuts. So you'll notice as I'm talking, like I'm starting to notice the commonalities. Like there's a lot of commonalities in the foods that we eat, like the eggs, like the fats, like the nuts and the seeds and the fatty acids and the good fats. So that's really important as well. Seafood and fish are really good, like I mentioned, salmon. But dark leafy greens are also really good. So spinach, kale, broccoli. If you have access to other dark leafy greens like Swiss chard, amazing for relieving cramps. The second part I wanted to talk about is how we can regulate our moods, because if you guys are like me, I am like a different person when I have my period or when I have PMS specifically, and it's hard. It's really, really hard to manage that for me. Like I feel like I need to isolate myself for the entire week because I'm just so, anyways, yeah, I could ramble on about that. But again, things to eat to balance our mood are, again, calcium. Vitamin D is also really important, and that can be found in fish oil, in egg yolks, and getting some sunshine. So get that vitamin D, because that's what makes us happy. You can also get that in a supplement form.
Vitamin D.
Oh yeah.
Makes us happy.
Oh yeah, vitamin D. That
Not
too.
all of us.
Not all of us. Yeah, some of us. Iron is also really important, especially to regulate our mood, but also just to replenish the iron sources, because we're losing a lot of blood once a month. So you can find that in beans, in red meats like beef. But when you're eating meat, if you're a meat eater, you want to make sure that you're choosing conscious sources of meat that are grass-fed, like typically organic if you can, and lean sources of red meat. You don't want a lot of fat in the meat that you're eating. You can also find it in dark chocolate. Yay! Chocolate is like good for everything when we have our periods, except if you live with herpes like I do. You just want to make sure that you're kind of keeping your chocolate intake in moderation, because dark chocolate and cacao can trigger herpes outbreaks. So just be careful and mindful of that. Just wanted to add that. Again, leafy greens are good for moods. And things like nuts, sunflower seeds, tofu, pumpkin seeds, and yeah, those sort of things are really good to help maintain and regulate our mood swings. And last but not least, bloating. We all tend to bloat. I know sometimes I feel like I have a watermelon in my uterus when I get my period. It's horrible. And again, calcium. Fiber is super important because that just helps us with our digestion. So almonds, everything that I mentioned, all of the foods that I mentioned have a lot of fiber in them, as well as whole grains are really good for fiber. But also apples, beans, as I mentioned, berries are really good because of the little seeds that they have in them, chia seeds, and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of commonalities in each sort of category for cramps, moods, and bloating. And I'm going to be sharing on my Instagram a post within the next couple of days just to kind of summarize these things. So if you didn't like take notes and frantically write things down, you'll be able to see what I'm saying. But equally as important are foods to avoid when you have your period and when you're premenstrual. Sugar is like the worst thing, and during our talks you'll hear me talk about how bad sugar is. I'll sound like a broken record, but I just can't talk about this enough because sugar contributes to the mood swings, and a lot of us crave sugar when we have our period, but it is like the worst thing to do, particularly refined sugar, because what it does is it causes your blood to spike up and down, and that just like really puts your body in a state of, I'm going to say, stress, and it causes your moods to fluctuate because it really negatively impacts your hormones. So sugar is really, really bad. Alcohol, I like to drink the odd time in moderation, but when it comes to my period, I particularly try to be mindful of what I'm consuming during that time, because not only does it dehydrate us, but it causes us to retain water, which makes us bloated. And so it's just not good, and it causes a lot of acidity in the body, and when your body is trying to detox itself when we have our periods, it's just not good. Your liver, it's not good for the liver because your liver has to process more. Caffeine as well can also contribute to all of that, same as alcohol, have the same effect as alcohol, but it can increase your cramping because it contracts the uterus. So you just want to be careful of your caffeine intake when you have your period as well. Just be mindful of that. And overly salty foods, again, causing water retention, making us bloated, making us feel not as maybe sexy as we normally would. Let's be honest. And carbohydrates, like refined carbs, like white flour, anything with white flour in it. Like when I have my period, all I want to do is eat pizza and salty things and chocolate, and I just want all of my comfort foods. But you just have to be really mindful and kind of listen to your body just to know, okay, what's going to be good for me in this time and what's not going to support me during this time. So again, I will provide more information on that on my social media, and then you'll be able to see what's good and what's not good. And there are so many other things, like we could talk about this for hours, like herbs that support essential oils, like other foods. But again, we just wanted to give a high level conversation about some of the foods that you should eat and should avoid when you have your period. And maybe we'll do another talk about the herbs specifically, or oils specifically when you have your period, because there's so many things and we could talk about it for hours. Just to be mindful of the time. And yeah, the last talk we did, we rambled on for an hour.
You got our special bleeding cosmic selves.
Yeah, we both. It's so funny because we've synced, our cycles have synced together, and we definitely noticed that last week on our talk last week, we were both a little bit cosmic.
We did it though.
We did, yeah.
Yeah.
But today I feel like we're a little bit more grounded.
Yeah, just a bit.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like when I have my period, I'm just so airy. Like another thing that I wanted to mention quickly is that Ayurveda is something that's super interesting if you haven't heard of it before, and I would love to share that on another talk at some point, to talk about how Ayurveda can impact our menstrual cycles. One other thing that I forgot to mention that's super important is most women tend to get very airy when we have our periods, and it's really important to nourish yourselves with grounding foods, as well as grounding practices. So like meditation, mindfulness, getting into nature, walking on the beach if you can, or just walking in nature. Really try to ground yourself, and eating warming foods when you have your period, like soups and stews and things that make you feel satiated and warming and comfortable, as long as they're supportive of all of the things that I just mentioned. That's really important when we have our period as well.
Beautiful.
There's my there's my part.
So yeah, we're just going to go into a little bit now. If you wanted to work more one-on-one, if you've got things going on like you know, extreme PMT symptoms, if you're not bleeding, if you are experiencing any kind of difficulty with your cycle, there are different ways that you can work with us both. So Adrienne, do you want to share a little bit on that?
Yeah, so I love to work with people one-on-one and share my nutrition and mindfulness and wellness practices. So just like I talked about today, there are foods that you can eat, there are foods that you can avoid when you have your period. And there's so much research and information out there that you can find on the internet. But if you need somebody that can help you kind of customize a plan to your specific needs, that's where I can help.
And also, it's like when you're working one-on-one with someone, the change actually happens when you make that commitment and you go through the process with working with someone who's committed to your success, where your self-saboteur can't come in and change things up. And yeah, I couldn't recommend Adrienne enough. She knows what she's talking about, and she's so beautiful and compassionate and wants to see change. So, and passionate. Compassionate and passionate.
Passionate.
And for me, if you want to work with me, I focus a lot on the different phases of the cycle and of the moon, and reconnecting to that and understanding that deeply and working together. So I often work in a 28-day container, depending on how long your cycle goes for, when we're talking about menstruation and cycle specifically. So we kind of, that whole 21 days to break a habit thing, we're going, that little bit further, where I used to offer these things in workshops and retreats, and they were really beautiful, but it was kind of like the magic would be there around the retreat and a little bit after, but then that real solid change of like habit changing practices weren't as easy to implement as working one-on-one together, where we're going through the whole cycle together and really creating change and finding what it is. I go through sister wound stuff, I go through mother wound stuff, I go through reconnecting to the womb, meeting your blood goddess, understanding your blood, your first menstruation experience, and just really, really getting a deep understanding of this feminine expression of bleeding.
So interesting. And it does go deep, I never was taught this stuff, so it's just fascinating.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Lunar mysteries and blood rites and passage are so powerful, and we're a part of our culture up until 5,000 years ago.
Yeah. Does do you want to open it up for questions?
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions?
Have a look on here if there's been.
I see one question. What about beans? Beans are good because beans can make you bloated, yes, but beans are also good because they have a lot of fiber, so that helps with digestion, which helps with the bloating. Just, in moderation, as with everything else. Let's see. Oh. Any other questions?
I've got one comment here that a sister said they love that we're doing this. We know so little about our bodies. Yeah, we love doing it too, and thank you for tuning in and making that commitment to learn more about your body. Can relate to the transition from lanky to having hips, really challenging the relationship with the body. Yeah, it's a very common thing, and it's something that just a tiny bit of information can completely solve for sisters. So the more we share on this, and the more we share this with our youth, our young women, it's so important. Beautiful. Another sister waters her plants with her blood. This is such nutrient dense, nourishing substance that is such a gift to give back to the earth, especially if we're not nurturing in other ways. We can nurture Mother Earth with our blood. Can we flag? I don't know.
Somebody mentioned from my side, peppermint tea is her go-to. So yeah, definitely beautiful to have peppermint tea. It's very relaxing, calming, helps with the bloating, helps with digestion, especially after meals.
I love peppermint.
Me too.
Peppermint oil, if you get menstrual headaches or migraines, can be really helpful.
Yeah.
Also on the womb. You can I'm going to save this live somehow, and we're going to share it on our YouTube channel, so you can watch it later, but it's available for 24 hours. Highlands magnesium phosphate. Yes, magnesium.
How do you feel
throughout
about
the
magnesium? Yeah, there was a question about magnesium supplements all month to help with cramps, and yes, I think magnesium should be one. If you do have like a supplement that you take on a regular basis, one of them should be magnesium, because as I mentioned, it's not only good for cramps, but it's also really good to help with relaxation. And if you experience any anxiety or stress in your life, it's really good if you take it before bed to help you sleep and just to help you relax. Magnesium is a really great supplement to take all the time, so I definitely recommend that. There was a comment about Ayurveda. Yes, Ayurveda is like, that's just a whole nother world, and we'd be so excited to talk about that on another episode. And another question was, do we help with trauma? And that's your specialty. Yeah.
So if you've experienced sexual trauma, if that's what you're relating to, then yeah, I work with sisters one-on-one with trauma and healing and reconnecting and whatever it is that's coming up for you. If it's something that I can't work with, then I'll refer you on to somebody else that can. But yeah, I work deeply with women in trauma.
Yeah, sexual trauma, yes. Yeah. Any other questions before we sign off?
Looks like that's everything from me.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so thanks everybody for tuning in. Thank you so much. We are excited to be doing this every week, so tune in. We've decided to change our time. We should probably mention that, because we have a large audience in North America, and that's primarily where I think our largest audience is, and in Australia as well. So we're trying to accommodate every audience that we have. We have some European followers as well. So we're trying just our best to accommodate everybody that can watch us live and engage with us.
We wanted our Sundays back.
And we love our self-care, date day Sundays.
And it was fun, but it was like,
yeah,
we weren't as free to do whatever. So.
Yeah, and for me, like, I'm better in the mornings. I'm just more energetic, I'm more creative, I'm more in flow in the morning. So for me, morning is good. Yeah, so I hope that works for everybody. Next week we are going to be talking about a very close topic to my heart. Every topic is, though. Candida. Oh, I just recently experienced a yeast infection, so it's just, yeah, we're going to be talking about that next week, so tune into that. Awesome. There's a lot to talk about on that topic as well. Anything else you want to add?
No, just for the people that are following me, I don't know if it's easy to find the Yoni nutritionist like through this live. So just so you know, if you want to see more in her post that's coming up on the foods to support menstruation, it's at Yoni Nutritionist. So that should be easy for you to find, and you can send her a DM through there if you're interested in working with her, or you can also contact me.
And same thing for me, like, if you're interested in learning more about working with your cycles and sexual trauma and anything like that, you can contact Kristin at Yonilicious. It's so good. Yonilicious. And I'm always posting about her and like sharing her stuff. We do everything together. Yeah. So we're always posting about each other. So you can just, if you're following us, you can see our stuff there too.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Well, this will be live, I guess, for the next 24 hours. So
and then we'll try and put it on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, and if you missed us live, you can still watch it, I think, within 24 hours. Yeah, so thank you so much again, and tune in next week when we talk about Candida. Woohoo! And if you have any questions or want to work with us, let us know. We're happy to help and support you. Mwah!
Ciao.